Hello everyone, thanks for stopping by. Real quick, I just was thinking as I was preparing, getting everything ready for this video, I just wanted to take a moment and just say thank you so much for even tuning into this. The fact that I could make something that might be able to help you in your school year, it's just an honor to be able to do that. And I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you so much for watching this, and for the people that leave comments and all that stuff, like, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Now, let's get into the show. So I thought today what I'd like to do is give you a snapshot of some of the things that we've been working on and how I'm trying to make engaging lessons in my classroom. Typically, in a regular school year, I do 5-week units. So I have a novel that we're working on. So if we're working on Lord of the Flies, I dissect it and make it so that it takes 5 weeks to get through that, from the introduction to the final test. But that 5 weeks, I see my students 5 days a week, typically in those weeks. Now, the schedule that we're on, I see my students 2 days a week. So I went from 5 days a week for 50-minute periods to 2 days a week at 80-minute periods. And you just don't get as much done. It's just impossible. Plus, the loss from a Monday to a Thursday is huge sometimes. So instead of 5-week units, I'm trying something where I'm doing 2-week units. So that means I see my students 4 times for 80 minutes each time. And instead of novels, we've been doing short stories and periodicals. And that's really been working for the most time. So the way I break that down is, so for students that I see on Mondays and Thursdays, that means on Monday, I introduce a topic and a new story. And I also tell you why we're learning through that story and why we're learning that particular topic. I really am a firm believer in the idea that if you can't explain why you're doing something in class, you probably shouldn't be doing it, or you should just think more about what's the reasoning here. But because it's on the test, or because you're gonna have to know this for next year, or because you're gonna have to know this for college, is not always a good enough answer. What is the bigger skill we're trying to build in the moment? Then on Thursday, we continue reading the story that we started on Monday. Following Monday is typically finishing stuff up and doing a quick review. And then that Thursday is some sort of assessment. So whether that's a quiz or a quick project or a test, it changes from unit to unit, but that's the assessment day. And that feels like a more sizable chunk to give students. It's not something that's so overwhelming that if you started something 5 weeks ago and now you're in week 4, but you weren't reading, or you're having a hard time, or you're depressed because you're stuck in COVID land, 2 weeks seems like a sizable chunk that is workable rather than a 5 or more week period. So in the last few weeks, we've been reading stories like The Sniper, Story of an Hour, After 20 Years, The Lottery, and a few other ones. And then reading a number of periodicals in there as well. Sometimes those are secondary texts that will complement something that we're reading, and other times they're standalone. And then for each one of those stories, I'm teaching some lesson about maybe inferences or mood, tone, point of view, plot development, characterization, something along those lines in there as well. So what that means is each text is coupled with some literary idea, some literary term, some idea that I want the students to learn through the text. So where's all this going? This is the part that I think is really cool. The students liked some of the stories. Some of them they didn't really understand, took a longer time to unpack some of that stuff. But I wanted this to move towards something that was really dialed into who kids were, what they might be interested in, and really tried to differentiate the instruction. Differentiating instruction is not always everyone's jam though. Sometimes kids love it, sometimes they don't like it. Some kids want to just sit in school, they want to take notes, they want to listen to what you're saying and regurgitate it on a test. That's not everybody's jam. Differentiated instruction to me means we are leveling the playing field and giving everyone an opportunity to do something that they like, to do something that's interesting to them, and to go a little bit outside of the box. So here's the project that my co-teacher and I came up with that is sort of the finale to this section of short stories. So in this project, we've decided to take all of our short stories and break them up into pieces. And those pieces are going to be something that the students have to do a project on. And because we're not very good at coming up with names for projects, we've called this one the Short Story Project.
The Short Story Project.
Which is a really underwhelming name because I think it's a cool project with a lame name, but you know, whatever, we're going with it. So the Short Story Project is this. The students have to pick from 4 different choices for their project. They can either create a comic book based on one of the stories. They can create a stop motion segment from a portion of one of the stories. They can create a playlist for different parts of one of the stories, or they can work together to create a movie trailer for one of the stories. Now, if you consider doing this, this is one of those things that students need to see examples of every single one. I find that when I show students examples, that even when we're working together in class and we're building Lego models for some story, when I build Legos and sit with the students, not only does it build community and camaraderie in the classroom and create a culture that's less of like a dictatorship and more of a facilitating role as a teacher, it's also showing kids what is possible. I've been building Legos for over 40 years. They haven't. Some of my students have never had Legos before because guess Legos are expensive, man. So it really helps to walk students through and show them what making a movie trailer might look like, what creating a playlist might look like. So for the stop motion piece, it's about students taking a section from a story that they think is interesting, and then they can use things like Lego minifigs or stick bots or stuffed animals or whatever they have around the house to create a stop motion film for that. There's tons of these online, so you don't have to make your own. I make my own, but it's because I like doing that stuff. But I've actually put a few links below to some student projects that I found on the internet that you can click on, and it'll take you to their YouTube channel, and so you can check those out. For the comic book, some students like to draw. Some kids like to create online illustrations. So they can either use online platforms to create this, or they can just create it on paper, take a picture of it, and submit that. But the comic book will follow the same idea. It is taking the story and breaking it down into its main components, which for us, we're asking for at least 8 to 10 cells in a story, which are the little boxes in a comic book. And each one has to have some sort of narration at the bottom so that we know what's going on, dialogue that actually comes from the story, and pictures that are true to the story. So it's really a way to give kids a visual for what they're reading, to really help them engage with what's going on because they have to dissect the story and not just passively read it. The movie trailer is something I've used for years, and some kids just use software that's already on their iPhone or on their Galaxy, and other students that know how to use editing software on their computer can do it on there. But it's a very simple 1 to 2 minute video that would be the trailer of the story that you have read in class. And the last one that I actually want to walk you through is the playlist that we're creating, because this is one that we use in my hip hop class all the time, and I think is going to work exceptionally well in this particular project. I find that any project or assignment that allows students to see a bit of themselves or to introduce a bit of who they are into the project is always more beneficial. It's like you're giving kids a chance to show who they are. One of my favorite poets of all time is Anis Mojgani. He has this great line in one of his poems where he says, "This is for those that are told speak when spoken to and then are never spoken to." And I feel like children are often that way, that we don't give them enough of a platform to share their voice, who they are, what they think, what they love. I think the playlist speaks to that. So what students are going to do, for this example, I'm going to use the story of the sniper. In the sniper, the students have to take 7 to 10 moments in the story in which the mood shifts. And then for this next part, I'm actually going to show you on the Samsung interactive display because I think it's a really cool way to map this out, to have all of the pieces there. And you can of course do this in other ways, but this is one of my favorite new tools that I have, so I'm going to show you on that. All right, so this is what the display is going to look like when I'm showing the class. So one of the things I love is that I can have everything on one board, but then I can call on pieces as I need them. So to kick this off, because we're talking about mood, I can first remind my students, what does mood mean? To do that, I can just pull down this card here, and I can make this slide as large as I want so that I can show the students. To remind them, in fact, what mood means, give them some examples, give them the definition on there, have a picture that reflects and that we can talk about that what the mood might be in this picture. Then I thought it might be a good idea to sometimes, because students are visual learners, have images that I can call upon as well and ask the students, what is the mood in this scene? What can you guess? What can you look at, pull out clues from, and try and figure out what the mood is in this scene? And also using images that kind of pull from the same time that our story was written in. The next thing I want to do is be able to really pull upon some images that are really going to reflect what's happening in the text. And so for that one, we have a picture of our location from the story so that before we even read this or before we do the project, I can remind students as to what this might look like, feel like. If I wanted to, I could have kids notice like how dark it is up in this section of the photograph and how if a sniper was up there, you'd really have a hard time seeing them. When they talk about the gutter of the street, I could remind students where that is in the street. We could talk about how there's not very much street lighting here either, leaving some very dark corners and alleyways. Now, usually when teaching tone and mood, I usually pull in some music at this point to talk about just what tone and mood sound like in someone's voice or in the music that you hear. And usually the jams that we go with are Barry White just about every year. Feel the vibe of that mood. Hear the tone of his voice and what is he trying to say and convey through those musical masterpieces. But because I'll get demonetized here on YouTube, I will save that for another video. The last piece is breaking down the story into sizable chunks that students can then pull clues from to figure out what the mood is so they can connect it to their songs. So for instance, for track 1, we take the opening paragraph from the story and we identify all the words in the paragraph by highlighting them to figure out what is the mood in this particular part. Then students would identify that mood and think of a song that they know that has that mood in it as well. They then connect the song by telling us the artist, the name of the song, they identify the mood in this paragraph, and they connect how that mood matches the mood in the song. And then because, just like every other story, the mood is going to slightly change throughout the piece. So in another part, they identify different words, and then that's going to be track 2 and track 3 and so on. And again, the beauty in this is that the students are connecting what we're learning in class with something that they're already interested in. So that they're not passively reading a text, but they're engaging with it and they're connecting it to other things outside of the story to make it come alive, make learning meaningful, and to be able to connect some of their own personality into what we're learning in class. I know it's hard out here for teachers right now. I know it's hard to come up with new ideas. I know it's hard to be excited about stuff, but I think that in the classroom, the more we can hand the reins of the learning to our students, to have them run their own learning and have us just facilitate to help them get from here to here, is the move. And so my hope is that in you seeing this, even if you don't teach literature, you can take some of these ideas and run with them. So I hope this idea is something that could motivate you or inspire you to help your students to keep growing. That's one less thing you have to plan. Just take it, run with it, sprinkle your own magic on top and make it your own. That's it, everybody. Peace.